Devon Modeste, also known as Papitet, of Wharf St. John, passed away on Friday 13th January 2023 at the age of 34. He was the brother of Donna Modeste in England, grandson of Morris and Rufin, also known as Sporty, nephew of 4 including Justin Gurry Modeste and Stephen Camper Patris, cousin of Jamanilla Modeste, Mosley Modeste and Patricia Fullerton. Many other relatives and friends including Gloria Mitchell, Sharon Morris, and friends and neighbors of Mongo Road, Guave Estate and surrounding areas. The funeral service and interment of the late Devon Modeste, also known as Papitet, of Wharf St. John, will take place on Tuesday 28 February at 1 p.m. at the Douglaston Cemetery. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home. Deslyn Mary Wilson Pascal, also known as Deso and Passo, of Lamoud St. George, who resided at Springs St. George, a well-known employee of the Springs Food Mart, died on Monday 30th January 2023 at the age of 53. She was the daughter of Pastor Septimus Charles, wife of Leon Pascal, mother of Karima Campbell, sister of Judith Purcell, Wendy Monroe, ASP Glenn Charles, Ricky, Joel in the USA, and Junior and Ivan in Trinidad. Sister-in-law of Ricky Monroe, John, George, Marva, Nadine and Nikisha in the USA, Wendy in Trinidad, and Maria, niece of Artlin Lewis and Catherine Graham in the USA. Godmother of 8. Adopted mother of many including Talisha and Janelle and Amanda in the USA. Many nieces and nephews in Canada, Trinidad, and the USA, too numerous to mention. Many other close relatives and friends including Richard Duncan, the Cyrus, Fraser, and Harris families of Lamoud and surrounding areas, Sandra Connaught and family, Raphael Campbell and family, the management and staff of Springs Food Mart, the management and staff of Sissons Paint Grenada Limited, the doctors and nurses at the General Hospital ICU, the Boca Secondary School graduating class of 1988, other family and friends of Lamoud, Springs, Birchgrove, Caliste, and surrounding areas in the USA, Canada, Trinidad, and the UK, too numerous to mention. The funeral of the late Deslyn Mary Wilson Pascal, also known as Deso and Passo, of Lamoud, who resided at Springs St. George, will take place on Tuesday 28 February at 1 p.m. Funeral service will be held at the Ebenezer Church of God, New Testament, Beaulieu St. George, and interment will be at the Beaulieu Cemetery. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home. Philip Sion Thomas, also known as Doc, of Cornet's Walk, Grove St. John, passed away on Saturday 28th January in Barbados at the age of 45. He was the son of Odessa and Eric Joe Clare, father of Keyshawn and Amika, brother of Trevor, Kenneth, and Erelon, Aunt Shirley Ann, also known as Chunky. Many other relatives and close friends, including the Thomas and Cato families, Nikita, Cecil, Beverly, the boys on the block, and friends and neighbors of Grove and surrounding areas. The funeral service for the late Philip Sion Thomas, also known as Doc, of Cornet's Walk, Grove St. John, will take place on Thursday, 28th February in Barbados. Funeral service will be held at the Whole Town Methodist Church, Barbados, and entombment will be at the St. James Cemetery, Paynes Bay, St. James, Barbados. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home.
Paul Anthony Glud Hassan of Bellevue, St. David, departed this life on Sunday, 12 February, at the age of 49. He was the brother of Carl, Blaze, Alistair, Joe, Betty, and Susan in the USA, Maureen in Canada, and Paula in Grenada. Brother-in-law of Kenrick and Twine, Carol Atkins Glud, and Anne-Marie Maureen Glud in the USA. Uncle of Marcia, Marcel, Christina, and Judy in Canada. Kellen, Akeen, Aziel, and Carlene in the USA. Marsha, Shannon, Daron, Kendra, Lisa, Sabrina, and Rolando in Grenada. His caregiver, Miss Annette Keep. Other relatives and friends including Randolph Bruno and family, the Glud family including Maureen, Jacqueline, and Leroy, the Hassan and Eben families of Walker, St. Andrew, Louison family of the Limes, Maureen family of Malmount, St. David, Miss Hilary Gibbs, Jaja, Dean, Rose Coffey and family, Veronica Glood and family of Sates, Dawn Roberts and family, management and staff of Kenny's Construction Limited, friends and neighbors of Bellevue and surrounding areas. The funeral of the late Paul Anthony Glood Hassan of Bellevue St. David will take place on Wednesday, 1st March at 1 p.m. The funeral service will be held at the Church of the Immaculate Conception and St. Joseph St. David, and the interment will be at the St. David Catholic Cemetery. Funeral arrangements have been entrusted to Lacroix Brothers Funeral Home.
Olive Teresa Wilson, also known as Ma Olive of Windsor Forest, St. David, passed away on Saturday, 4th February 2023 at the age of 90. She was the mother of Albert Wilson, also known as Breaky in the USA, Vero Wilson in Aruba, Angus Wilson in Florida, Sherma Campbell and Alston Wilson, also known as Cow in Trinidad, Camelin, Kennedy and Jeffrey Wilson in England. Grandmother of 33, including McQuiver, Errol, Melina, David, Olivia, Nelson, Nixon, Loretta, Zakiya, Alex, Malaki, Joshua, Miley, and Nikisha. Great-grandmother of 27, including Isaac, Solomon, and Zayden. Great-great-grandmother of Marie Kai Wilson, sister of Jordan Francis in Trinidad and Edith Francis in the USA. Mother-in-law of Bernadette Wilson in the USA and Maudlin Wilson in Trinidad. Aunt of many, including Bernard, Anne, Veronica, Teresa, Janice, Anthony, Elinthia, Junior, Antoinette, Curtis, Yvette, Ruth, and Errol. Caregivers Agnes Telesford and Stacia Mitchell. Many other relatives and friends in Trinidad, Canada, the USA, and Aruba, including Byron, Prudence Murray and family, Kimon, the pastor and members of Faith Sanctuary Windsor Forest, the Goddard family of Montmoritz, the Greenwich, Francis, Telesford, McMeo, Leslie and Jeremiah families, Joyce Stewart and family, and friends and neighbors of Windsor Forest, Minorca, Vincennes, and surrounding areas. The funeral of the late Olive Teresa Wilson, also known as Ma Olive of Windsor Forest, St. David, will take place on Wednesday, March 1st at 1 p.m. Funeral service will be held at the Prayer of Faith Sanctuary, Windsor Forest, St. David, and interment will be at the Windsor Forest Cemetery. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacroix Brothers Funeral Home. Dorothea Langdon, also known as Eileen of Belvedere Carriacou, passed away on Monday, 23rd January 2023 at the age of 91. She was the mother of Ashford and Nerissa Joseph, grandmother of John, Sean, Jason, Karine, Adela, Nudge, Ashley, Paul, Leona, and Kiyomi, great-grandmother of 26, sister of Henrietta Langdon, Garfield, Iola, and Alton Phillip, aunt of Sherman and Kingsley Langdon, Norman Cox, Jacqueline and Pete Phillip, Sylvan Adams, Philip, Randolph, Yvonne, Lillian and Alfred Phillip, Sharon, Oswald and Roosevelt, Philip, Keisha and Tammy Cox, Cassandra and Victor Phillip, grand-aunt of 20. Other relatives and friends including the Langdon families, the Quashie, Phillip and Cox families, other relatives and friends including members of the Dover Baptist Church and Mount Calvary Spiritual Baptist Church, Bellevue South Carriacou, and neighbors of Belvedere, Limler, and surrounding areas too numerous to mention. The funeral of the late Dorothea Langdon, also known as Eileen of Belvedere Carriacou, will take place on Wednesday, March 1st at 1 p.m. Funeral service will be held at the Mount Calvary Spiritual Baptist Church, Bellevue South Carriacou, and entombment will be at the Thibault Cemetery. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacroix Brothers Funeral Home. Rupert Lawrence John, also known as Frenchie, of Snellhole St. Patrick, who resided at Africa Mardi Gras St. Paul St. George, retired pharmacist and chief pharmacist at the Ministry of Health, passed away on Wednesday, February 15th, 2023, at the age of 86. He was the husband of Ruth John, father of Roxana, Risa, Alberto, Patricia, Abigail, and Richie. grandfather of Nikwana, Destiny, Jeremy, Dale Jr., Deanna, Nuressa, Ricky and Nyla. Father-in-law of Charles Andre Duberger, Timothy Peters and Dale Kelly. Brother of Maudlin in Trinidad and Norma in England. Brother-in-law of David Charles, Bedell Frame, Ian Canning and Gregory Frame, Gillian, Hermione, Louisa, Aldine and Aldit. Uncle of many including Albert, Clement, Carly and Allison. Many other relatives and close friends in Trinidad and Tobago, the United Kingdom and the USA, including the John, Tamar, Noel, Cato, Mathlin and Griffith families, Florence Andrews, Clement Gabriel, Charles Ferguson, the Bain family, Myra Lewis, Reynald St. Louis, Chris Charles, Gregory Hackett, the Jeremiah and Crosby families, the Ranjit Singh and Cox families, Dusain Nayak, Denzel and Newton, the priests and parishioners of the Roxborough and Labrie Catholic churches, and friends and neighbours of Africa, Mardi Gras St. Paul's, and Snellhole St. Patrick. The funeral of the late Rupert Lawrence John, also known as Frenchie, of Snellhole St. Patrick, who resided at Africa, Mardi Gras St. Paul, St. George, will take place on Thursday, March 2nd at 1 p.m. Funeral service will be held at the St. Patrick's Catholic Church, Satez, and interment will be at the Churchyard Cemetery. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home. Anne Agnes Lallion of Belle Plaine, Mondelez, St. David, a well-known vendor at the vegetable and fish markets, passed away on Sunday, 5th February 2023, at the age of 79. Left to mourn are her 9 children, Carvel Lallion Dunn, Veronica Loisien and Jerry Lallion in the USA, Joycelyn Paul, Richard, Suzette, Jason, and Nixon Lallion, all in Grenada. 16 grandchildren including Kayana, Kaydonna, Nakia, Shireen, Kristen, Paul, Eloni, and Xavier. Nieces and nephews Magnus, Winston, Jude, Trevor, Steve and Tonya Felix, Angela Redhead, Claire Thomas, Boston, Rajas, Erilyn, Tracy Mapp and Janice Sylvester. 2 sons-in-law, John Dunn and Junior McPherson. 3 daughters-in-law, Alicia, Tracy and Erica. Caretaker, Miss Linda Noel. 3 godchildren, Annette, Claudia and Eslyn. Relatives and friends including Lorna Felix, Jane Antwine, Christine Wilkinson, Grace Stewart, Peter Horatio Brizan of Tropicana, Jean McIntosh, Velma, Frida Greenwich, Mr. and Mrs. Pascal, Tanti Rosanna, Macvita Alexis, Sandra Stewart, the Felix, Sylvester, Carter, Horsford, Bailey and Jacob families, Father Ronald Holder and the members of the prayer group at the Roxborough RC Church, and neighbours and friends of Belle Plaine, Mondelez, Corbotown and in Trinidad. The funeral of the late Anne Agnes Lallion of Belle Plaine, Mondelez, St. David will take place on Thursday, 2nd March at 1 p.m. Funeral service will be held at the Roxborough RC Church, St. Paul's, and entombment will be at the Mount Airy Cemetery. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home.
Mary Catherine Redhead George, also known as Poor Cockroach of Fontenoy St. George, passed away on Wednesday, 8 February, at the age of 85. She was the mother of Cardell, Camille, Mike, Essen, Rondell, Dammy, Simeon, and Errol, also known as Banton, sister of Michael and Floris in Canada, and Util in Grenada, grandmother of 28, great-grandmother of 23, aunt of many, mother-in-law of Adeline George, Leonard Gani, and Diana C. George, sister-in-law of Alston George. Many cousins, other relatives and friends including Abraham, Bartholomew, Bishop, Clark, Fawkes, Mitchell, Redhead, Pascal, Andrews and George families of Fontenoy, Montgranby, Grand Mall, Westerhall, Victoria, Happy Hill, Cherry Hill and Brisbane, the Durant family in Canada and Grenada, the Byam family in St. George's, friends and neighbours of Fontenoy and surrounding areas. The funeral of the late Mary Catherine Redhead George, also known as Poor Cockroach of Fontenoy St. George, will take place on Thursday, 2nd March at 1 p.m. The funeral service will be held at the Garden of Remembrance Funeral Chapel, Cemetery Hill, St. George, according to Pentecostal rites, and entombment will be at the St. George's Center Cemetery. Funeral arrangements have been entrusted to Lacroix Brothers Funeral Home.
Andy St. John, also known as Bootman, Luckett or Bress, of Blackbay St. John, passed away on Sunday 12th February 2023 at the age of 61. Left to mourn is his wife Glenna Holder St. John, children Andra Dana St. John Wickham, Kendon in the USA, and Kendall St. John, grandchild Richard Wickham, brothers Reginald Ferguson, Clinton Daniel, and Stephen Lorraine in the UK, sisters Kathesha Alert, Eunice McPhee, Dale Rubin in Trinidad, Floris and Pamis Lorraine in the United Kingdom, in-laws Deanne Dixon Friedel, Dawn Dixon Richer, Camilla Dixon, and Kemma Marshall Price, all in the USA. Aunts and uncles including Zilla, Lenny, and Ulrich Lorraine. Many nieces, nephews, other relatives and friends including Gemma Holder, Faith Lynn Holder in the UK, Senor Bain in the USA, Patricia Nelson, Cecil Smith, Nurse Bagwan and nurses of the dialysis unit, the Holder family, the Cador families of Grandroy, Rachel and the boys by the shop, and neighbours and friends of Blackbay St. John and surrounding areas. The funeral of the late Andy St. John, also known as Boatman, Luckett or Bress, of Blackbay St. John, will take place on Friday, March 3rd at 2 p.m. Tributes begin at 1 p.m. Funeral service will be held at the St. Matthew's Anglican Church, Blackbay, and interment will be at the Blackbay Anglican Cemetery. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home. Jennifer Michelle Marshall, née Noel, also known as Jenny, of Hopevale St. George, a former employee of the Grenada Cooperative Bank, passed away on Wednesday, February 8th, 2023, at the age of 46. Left to cherish her memory is her husband Neil Marshall, father Jeremiah Noel, daughters Savannah Noel and Michelle Marshall, sisters June Jeremiah, Amanda Redhead, Gillian, Nicole, and Shatonia Noel, uncle Oscar Jeremiah, aunt Doreen Francis, many cousins including Lisa and Ainsley, many nieces and nephews including Drusilla, Javal, and Michael, brother-in-law Roger Redhead, sister-in-law Judy Ann, other relatives and friends including the Worm family of Mongeloo, the Bowen family of Mongeloo and Marianne, Innovative Healthcare Services, Nurse Andrea Blake, Hilary Alexander, Daniel Kwashi Blackman, the management and staff of the Grenada Cooperative Bank, and friends and neighbours of Marianne, Hopevale, Laborie, and surrounding areas. The funeral of the late Jennifer Michelle Marshall, née Noel, also known as Jenny, of Hopevale St. George, a former employee of the Grenada Cooperative Bank, will take place on Friday, March 3rd at 1 p.m. Funeral service will be held at the Calvany Gospel Hall, and entombment will be at the Mongeloo Cemetery. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home.
Corona Lucy Fraser, also known as Caro of Lamode St. George, she was a former employee of the Ministry of Agriculture, passed away on Sunday, 5th February, at the age of 84. She was the mother of Alicia Fraser Hosford, Jacob Fraser in England, Helen Stephanie Fraser, and Andy Fraser, sister of Errol Lewis and Clarice Fraser, mother-in-law of Gillian Fraser in England and Innocent Wayne Lazama, sister-in-law of Monica Lewis, grandmother of Petra Fraser, Portia Fraser, Michael Akimo Hosford in the USA, Akeisha Fraser, Andre Allard Fraser, Samantha Allard McBurney, and Andrea Fraser, Raquel, Travis, and LaShonda Fraser in Canada, Marcus and Donisha Daniel in Anguilla, Marlon Lazama in the USA, great-grandmother of 14 including Cheryl, Charisse, Aurel, Makisha, Michael, Haley, and Demarkin in Anguilla, grandmother-in-law of Dr. Delina Hosford in Florida, and Kizzy Allard Fraser. Many other relatives and friends including Agatha Harris and the family of Lamode, the Sam and Cape families of Lamode, Rita Haynes and family, Michael and Stanley Fraser, Mr. Welcome Ray and family of Carriacou, Edge Hill family, Jarvis family and Linnick family, Miss Cynthia Alexander, Matthew Telesford, also known as Slate, Karima Campbell and family of Lamode, Annie Aladdin family, Sylvia Telesford and family, Sister Nicole Williams Fraser, Sharon Duncan, and Gemma Thomas and family in the USA, the Patrick family of the USA, doctors and nurses of the female medical ward of the General Hospital, many other relatives and friends of Lamode and surrounding areas too numerous to mention. The funeral of the late Corona Lucy Fraser, also known as Caro of Lamode St. George, a former employee of the Ministry of Agriculture, will take place on Monday, 6th March at 1 p.m. with tribute and service at 2 p.m. Funeral service will be held at Our Lady Help of Christian Catholic Church, Beaulieu St. George, and entombment will be at the Beaulieu Cemetery. Funeral arrangements have been entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home. David Andrew Monroe, also known as brother of Victoria St. Mark, passed away on Monday, 16th January at the age of 59. He was the close and dear friend of Janet Fraser, father of Nicole in the USA, Nikisha and Nikita Paul in Grenada, stepfather of Ketisha Bernard in Canada, grandfather of Kyrie, Zora, and Zanaki Paul, father-in-law of Charlene Paul in the USA, brother of Geraldine, Marva, Sean, and Sharon in the UK, Alistair, Carol, and Winifred in the USA, Martha in Tobago, Stephen in Barbados, Ruth, Ruthlyn, Peter, Willis, Jacqueline, Beggs, Joycelyn, Aliston, Katie, Rebecca, and Sanita in Grenada, nephew of Ginger, Vita, Maros, and Nathaniel, uncle of many including Donnie, Donna, Akira, Samantha, Nevron, Nana, Avanel, Carlson, and P.C. Addison Fraser, many cousins including Natasha, Clara, and Francis Monroe, Macosta Charles, John, Linton, teacher Jennifer Clement, Jenny, Denrick, and Heston, caregivers Delcy Phillip and Malika Patrick, many other relatives and friends in the UK, USA, Canada, and Grenada including Chenny Joseph, past and present executive and members of GFA and Hurricane Sports Club, Grassroots Football Club, the Football Fraternity in Grenada, Wayne Francis, Dorset McKell, Finley Fletcher, Barrington, Mrs. Clarice Modeste, and Julie Dubois, Peter Shala Andrew and family, Taisha Paul, the Monroe, Charles Fraser, Clement, Paul and Mitchell families of Victoria, Glenda Frederick and family, Chester Alfred and family, friends and neighbors of Coast Guard, Diamond, Waltham, and surrounding areas. The funeral of the late David Andrew Monroe, also known as brother of Victoria St. Mark, will take place on Wednesday, 8th March at 1 p.m. The funeral service will be held at the Victoria RC Church St. Mark, and the interment will be at the Coast Guard Cemetery. Funeral arrangements have been entrusted to Lacroix Brothers Funeral Home.
Evadne Mary Gill Alexander, also known as Vads, of Birchgrove St. Andrew, passed away on Monday, February 20th, 2023, at the age of 71. The funeral arrangements for the late Evadne Mary Gill Alexander, also known as Vads of Birchgrove St. Andrew, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home. Isaac Nathaniel Peters, also known as I.N. of Tempe St. George, passed away on Friday, 17th February 2023, at the age of 92. The funeral arrangements for the late Isaac Nathaniel Peters, also known as I.N. of Tempe St. George, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacroix Brothers Funeral Home. Darius Nicholas, also known as Zebu and Owl, of Caliste St. George, died on Tuesday, 21st February 2023, at the age of 56. The funeral arrangements for the late Darius Nicholas, also known as Zebu and Owl of Caliste St. George, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home. Anthony Felix Scott, also known as Hero, of Victoria St. Mark, who resided at Fontenoy St. George, passed away on Saturday, 18th February 2023, at the age of 66. The funeral arrangements for the late Anthony Felix Scott, also known as Hero, of Victoria St. Mark, who resided at Fontenoy St. George, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home. Tilda Monica Seathall, also known as Miss Bean, of George V. Street, Grenville, St. Andrew, passed away on Friday, 17 February 2023, at the age of 91. The funeral arrangements for the late Tilda Monica Seathall, also known as Miss Bean, of George V. Street, Grenville, St. Andrew, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home.
The management and staff of MTV extend deepest condolences to those of you whose loved ones have passed on. Thank you for watching.
The Bible, this book, familiar to every person on the face of the earth today, gives us directions for our life. When death comes, there is great sorrow to the family and friends and loved ones of the one that has passed on. But if we put our trust in the Lord Jesus Christ and we follow the instructions of this book, we know we will meet again. We don't take it lightly. We don't take it for granted. There must be a decision, because without a decision, the decision is made to be separated from God. So put your trust in the Lord. Believe. The thief on the cross said, Lord, consider me. And Jesus said, today you would be with me this very hour. And they died together. So put your trust in the Lord, and God bless you during your time of grief and bereavement. Put your trust in the Lord.